Alana. I just want to mention to the students, thanks for coming. This is our Fuse lecture series. It's an annual series that we're kind of giving a reboot to. We took a year or two off, and but now we're getting back into the swing of things. And we're very honored to have our kickoff lecturer, Alana Cuellar. And just a little bit about Alana. Alana is a Venezuelan American potter living in Wisconsin. Her functional pots are intended for enjoyment in daily life. She believes handmade objects contain quiet magic that cultivates pleasure, joy, and connection. Alana is inspired by ancient pots, cooking, textiles, the natural world, and the community of potters around her. Alana is represented by Schaller Gallery from Baroda, Michigan, and the Grand Hand Gallery in St. Paul, Minnesota, but primarily shows her work through open studio events, farmers markets, and other pop-ups in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. Her education in clay has primarily unfolded working with her dad, Potter Guillermo Cuellar, since 2016. She has occasionally assisted and attended workshops at various craft schools as well. Alana became a full-time potter in 2020 and currently works as a co-host of the St. Croix Valley Pottery Tour. So with that said, I'll invite Alana to take over, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you so much.
Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. Joe and Rochelle, it's really nice to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about my work and myself. I'm just gonna share my screen. And I don't get a chance to do a lot of these, so I hope I'm not too clunky. Okay, here we go. All right. So as Joe said earlier, my name's Alana. I'm a functional potter primarily. I am full-time, so that means that my primary source of income isn't, I don't have a side job, and I don't really teach. I don't do other things. I make pots and I sell them, and that's how I make my living. And yes, functional pots is my primary focus. And I'll talk about a little bit about my studio practice, how I got to where I am today, and also the financial side of things a little bit too. But I'll just start at the beginning, which is where I was born. I was born in Caracas in Venezuela. This is a picture of the city, sort of a very literal representation of the class divide that is going on down there and has been going on there for a really long time. I grew up in sort of an unusual situation. My mom is from the United States and my dad is from Venezuela. I attended an international school when I lived there. I went through high school, and my mom was a teacher at this school, so I got to kind of go to this private school for free. So I was in this kind of funny situation where I had a Venezuelan family and connections to the country, but I never really fully fit in there with my American mom. And naturally, of course, I don't really fit in here either, but that's okay. That was just sort of my experience. So I lived there throughout the 90s and early 2000s. I moved to the US in 2005, as did my family. And my parents are kind of boomer, back to the land people a little bit. They bought some land outside of the city, about an hour away, in an area where there was a lot of coffee farming. So we had kind of a casual coffee farm that, you know, we would grow coffee and never really sold it widely, but it was just kind of something people did. It'd be like, I don't know, out here, a lot of people have maple trees and they tap for syrup. So it's just kind of like that. So this is the driveway on the land that my parents had. And my relationship to pottery started very young because my dad is a potter. So I really grew up around pottery, and I grew up around, you know, someone who is constantly in the process of making pottery. This on the left is his kiln, and in the back is his studio space. We lived basically on a hillside, so everything was pretty vertical in Venezuela. and threw in a picture of a sloth that I found when I was looking through my old photos because I miss them. They were around all the time. So in 2005, I came to the US for college. I bounced around a lot. I worked in an arts nonprofit. I worked in higher ed administration for a little while and lived in cities. I lived in Chicago and Oakland. And then I decided to move back sort of to this region in the Midwest, which is close to where my parents now live. And it was a really satisfying and sort of like, I don't know, it was just pretty life-changing to return to living a little bit closer to nature. And my relationship to nature it's a big part of my work. I'm really inspired by some of the textures that you come across, just like the materials that exist in nature. Obviously, clay and soil have a strong connection. And I think nature is it's really easy to think of like sort of cliches when it comes to nature as it being peaceful or I don't know, like you think of like a landscape painting or something that's a little bit cliche, but I think nature is a lot weirder and spookier and more interesting when you get up close and you see it for what it is and how it happens. This was on the left was a bear print that I found in the woods behind our house recently. Yeah, so I'll just show you a couple of images of some recent work. These are some more sculptural things that I like to make. They're lanterns, so they cast a really nice light. Again, you can see really interested in like texture and pattern. This is a little like bed vase that I made for a recent show. But these are a little bit more labor intensive and sculptural type pots. Again, there's like texture on the surface and built up on the forms. But I really, the core of my practice is making functional pots. Not that I don't like to spend more time on those more sculptural objects as well. I really like making things that people can use in their daily life. They're supposed to live in people's kitchens and get used and get dinged up a little bit. I really like the fact that someone who maybe doesn't have any experience in the arts or doesn't have I don't know, someone who maybe feels intimidated by a more traditional arts environment can understand a pot if it has like a functional aspect to it. And it could be an entry point into thinking more about art generally, or just about, objects that we use. Or it could just be a, joyful experience in and of itself. That really inspires me and motivates me in my work. Yeah, nature. These pots are sort of connected to my love of like textiles, basketry. There's a strong tradition of baskets and textiles in Venezuela that I feel like I'm kind of referencing that in my work a lot of the time. I'll show you guys a few process images from the studio as well. So I really like playing with negative space. And I got super interested in using wax resist to create different patterns and decoration on these, functional pots. So for this, you use wax resist. On the left, you can see it's sort of gray on the surface of the glazed pot. And then I would go over with a cobalt stain that would stain the part of the glaze that didn't have the wax on it. And then you can see the end result on the right. And it wasn't until I started really playing with this pattern that I realized it looks, like the coffee beans that were around me throughout my childhood. And I don't know, maybe it's coincidence or maybe it was on purpose. I'm not sure. This is another process that has been really fun to sort of figure out. I have started doing some relief carving. In this case, I'm making a candlestick. I also like to make tiles and soap dishes and things like that. But basically, you use an X-Acto knife and cut at an angle to carve out the negative space in the form. And it can be really nice if you're using a glaze that reacts well to like the edges and the textures of the form. So these are super fun to make. Let's see. So yeah, this is just some of my work getting set up for a craft fair. And you can see there's a lot of things that are sort of, multiples, which is a big part of my practice. As I said, I have to have enough work to bring to different shows and to have for sale. So a big part of my working process is making lots of the similar, like a similar kind of pot. So a set of dishes or a set of bowls rather than just one individual. And I think this has also helped me think about like the forms more deliberately and be able to refine them a little bit in the process of repetition. Repetition is super big part of being a potter for me. And I will talk a little bit more about that, but I'll take a quick step back and just tell you a little more about how I ended up making pots and my education. So I moved to the US in 2005, graduated from college in 2009. I studied literature in college, which was really fun, but not the most practical degree. But I spent a lot of time doing sort of email-based jobs and working with some lovely people, but the work that I was doing was really dissatisfying. I felt my life was very sedentary. I didn't have the opportunity to like really use my body in my work. And I felt like I would go to work and be busy all day, and then I would turn around and there would be nothing to show for it. You know, I would have just sent emails all day, or talked on the phone, or had meetings and stuff. And it was just a kind of a frustrating time for me. I didn't feel like I had any practical skills. And we can debate whether or not knowing how to make pottery is a practical skill, but it's a skill. So I got a scholarship to go to the Penland School of Crafts, which is in North Carolina. And I spent 2 months there. It's a really beautiful place. And it really allowed me to sort of deep dive and see what it would be like to make pots every day. And I've been to another craft school, Haystack Mountain School of Crafts, which is up in Maine. And I know they have really great opportunities for college students. I know you can get college credit sometimes. There's work study opportunities. So it's, you know, there's a cost, but there are ways to make it more affordable. And it's also just a lovely way to meet, the teaching artists are, we're often working potters, working artists. They have programs in textiles and painting and photography, like all these different media. So it's just a lovely place to make those connections and to people who are trying to make their life in that particular field. So going to Penland was super life-changing. It was really wonderful. Met a lot of great people and had a wonderful time just really being able to dive in. And then, of course, another huge part of my learning experience has been working with my dad, Guillermo. That's him on the right in the super cool hat in the 70s when he was in college learning how to make pots. We've worked together in some capacity since 2016. And I think when I was a kid, I never really made pots. I mean, I would mess around a little bit with clay, but, he never really encouraged or discouraged me to do it. I think he probably grew up with an overbearing father, and he didn't want to be that. He wanted me to sort of make my own choices and find my own way. And I don't know, given all that, I think he was pretty surprised when I expressed an interest in getting involved in pottery. So from 2016 to 2020, I worked in his studio pretty much every day, and I got to watch him work, which was really amazing. I think if you're at all interested in making pots, finding a way to make a connection with an established potter, making yourself useful, offering to do some of the less glamorous studio work in exchange for just being able to observe or work alongside somebody, I think that's the biggest way that I've learned, is just by watching him and being around him. He handles the material really well, and he knows how to throw really beautifully too. And it's also just been really nice to spend time with him and help him out around the studio. There's a lot of work to do. Okay, so looking at old pots is also a really big part of my ceramics education. I am super lucky to be connected to people who have really great pottery collections. This is a set of plates by Shoji Hamada that I got to look at, which was super exciting. He's a really well-regarded Japanese potter from mid-century. And this is a chunk of a handle from an old medieval jug. I don't know exactly where it's from, but I took this picture as a reference point because I was thinking about the proportions and the silhouette, the attachment points, like how the volume changes from, the middle part of the handle versus the attachment. Looking at old pots, I think it's really allowed me to not only to like appreciate the pots themselves, but to really appreciate, I don't know, just like thinking about some of the same things that like long gone humans were probably thinking about, some of those like material concerns or aesthetic concerns. It makes me feel really grounded. So these are just some older pots that I think are really beautiful that I wanted to show. And that inspire me like very explicitly, like lanterns I've been making for a while that were very much inspired by these Iranian pieces that I saw some photographs of. I haven't seen them in person. I'd really love to. And then, these Mimbres pots I think are really spectacular too, in their form and their decoration. And I don't think I would attempt to, mimic them or create my own version of them, but I just think they have a lot to teach when it comes to like composition and energy and line quality and stuff like that. So I think those are beautiful. I also just really love finding old pots that are really funny. Like you can tell somebody probably had a good time making this. I like pots that are sort of playful and energetic, maybe a little rough around the edges, but I think that's what makes them really beautiful. These are some a little bit more recent examples of work that I love. Clary Ilian, who's made this jug on the right, or jar on the right, I'm sorry, on the left. She is a potter in Iowa, and she wrote a really wonderful book called The Potter's Workbook, which is a really sort of a deep dive into some of the like technical considerations of like composition, scale, volume, line, thinking about all of those really like I guess they would be sort of like traditional concerns of like what makes a strong pot. And she has these really intensive exercises in this workbook. So if you want to like go to throwing boot camp, the Potter's Workbook is a good place to start to get lots of information. And of course, it would be really disingenuous of me to not say that my dad's work is super influential. It's I feel like there's certain aesthetic qualities of his pots that have kind of imprinted on me, and I'm just kind of too close to the work to be able to define exactly what those are. So even if I'm reacting in contrast to something that he would make, I'm always my work is always sort of like in dialogue with his kind of work and the tradition of work that he comes from. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my studio space. So switching gears, this was in 2020 during COVID, we decided that I should probably set up my own throwing space at my house. So that was kind of what prompted it, but it was a good time for me to start making pots kind of independently, at least a little bit more independently. So this is a treadle wheel. This is my wheel. It's sort of an analog wheel system. We set it up on my front porch, which was either really cold or really hot and drafty. And I live on a hill, so it's kind of sliding down the hill. And it was pretty ramshackle for a little while, but I was actually able to convert it into this. And it's the space that I'm talking to you from right now. And this was right after I moved everything back in after the renovation, and it has never been this clean since. So this is sort of misleading, I guess. But I live just on the border of Minnesota and Wisconsin, and Minnesota is actually a really wonderful place for artists because they have a lot of state-funded grant opportunities, but just by virtue of living on the other side of the border, I'm not eligible for all of those grants. But even if you live in a state where there aren't a lot of artist grants, oftentimes there will be grants for small businesses. So this was in 2020. I mean, there was a lot of money sloshing around with COVID, and I got a grant just for being a small business, and I was able to use some of that money to renovate our front porch and turn it into like a full season. Like it's basically just a room on the front of the house, and it's small, but it's kind of amazing. I mean, it's my space. I have access to it all the time. It's just been a total game changer for my studio practice. So yeah, so even if there aren't artist grants available, explore opportunities for small business grants in addition to that, because there could be something that fits what you're trying to do if your work has something to do with your income. Okay, this is just an example of like it probably took me about 4 or 5 hours to make these pots, just what I would make in a day in the studio. And I'll go back and trim them, add handles, carve out the candlesticks on the left. Again, working in multiples, creating a volume, working in series, varying the series, refining a form, repetition. It's all super important to my process. This is a picture of the kiln. So I make pots at my house, but I still glaze and fire with Guillermo over at his place. So he lives, again, just on the other side of the border in Minnesota. And he has a gas kiln, and it's called a car kiln. So a lot of times, bigger high fire kilns, you see there's like a brick door that you have to take the bricks down and climb into the kiln to set up the pots in a stack. And with this kiln, you basically like roll the floor of the kiln out on some treads or like rails, so it stays on a track, and then you add all the shelves and the pots and build it up and then roll it back in and close it up. It's just a little more accessible, but we can fit hundreds of pots in this kiln, so it takes a lot of energy to have a firing between the two of us. Okay, so I know we're on Zoom. I have no idea if this dumb meme is landing, but this is sort of the cliche of like what people experience. You know, you learn how to make pottery in sort of a sort of safe environment where you don't have to take into consideration all of the factors that come with, you know, running a business and having other external pressures. So I have never really found this to be true for me. I think that the truth is a lot more complicated, and I hope this visual metaphor translates, but this was my sort of way of thinking about how I balance my creative practice with the practicality that you need in order to make a living and make a life as a potter. So if you've ever seen someone throw a pot, or if you've ever thrown a pot on a wheel, you know that when you spin the wheel, there's centrifugal force that pushes the clay outward, and you have to apply pressure to raise the pot up into a stable form. And so in this metaphor, I was imagining that, you know, all of these different elements that we think of when we think of making pottery or learning to make pottery or being an artist of any kind, really, that's all pushing outward, right? So you've got creativity, exploring new ideas, improving your skills. Maybe you really love a certain material or a certain process. You have like inspiration, just like weird, wild ideas that you want to try. That's pushing outward. And then pushing inward on that and constricting that. I mean, I think of these things as being parameters. There's the limits of time. There's the limits of, you know, deadlines. There's the need to earn a living. There's access to studio and facilities and materials. So like, you know, maybe you really want to just like dip everything in gold luster, but it costs like hundreds and hundreds of dollars. You know, that's a limitation. Joe was just talking about commissions, which, you know, can be like, it can feel like a restriction because you're making work to somebody else's specifications, but it can also really like push you to like improve your technical mastery, and it can push you to deep dive in something that maybe you've been putting off, but you know you want to. So I think I really try to understand those concerns of like making a living and making it real as parameters that sort of support and undergird and like make, you know, it gives shape to my creative process. And I think we typically think of something like the need to earn a living or the limits of time as being detrimental or destructive to a creative practice. But I really think that parameters are super important. and it's more about balance. I mean, obviously, like uh, if you have like really, extreme financial pressure, that's going to crush your creativity. It's going to crush your ability to do all these other things and enjoy your time in the studio. But I also find that, like, if I have infinite time, it's incredibly hard for me to get things done. I really thrive with more of a deadline and more structure in that way. And sometimes you have to impose it on yourself, being, your own boss, which is a blessing and a curse. It's really great to be your own boss, but then you have to be your own boss. Um, yeah, and again, it's definitely about balance. If somebody has like a full-time job, they might not need to earn a living with their creative practice, but they might only be limited to like evenings and weekends. So it really depends on like how you want to make it work, and different people make it work in different ways. And what I'm talking about today is just how I've managed to make that balance. It's not the right way to do it. It's just a way to do it. Okay, so how do I sell my pots? I do a few different things. I sell pots at various like farmers markets, craft fairs, things like that. I really enjoy the informal environment. I just have fun at farmers markets. I like love farmers because they'll often trade food for pots, which is, I think, really fun. And it's also a really lovely way to talk to people, talk to your audience, and to build a mailing list. Sometimes people will come and they won't buy anything, but then they'll come back a week later or a month later, and they'll like remember that they saw something and they kept thinking about it, and they'll pick it up that time. So it's a slower build, but I really enjoy those environments. It's not always the most glamorous experience when you get rained out. Yeah, it can be kind of a failure, but it's also fun. I have also had some experience with a couple of galleries, not a ton. I have my work online right now through Schaller Gallery, which I had a show there in March of this year. And, I think it's complicated because my price points are on the, like for pottery, I think probably on the lower side. It just has to do with, how I like to sell my work, what kind of work I'm interested in making. I think selling through a gallery for someone who's maybe, making a painting or a sculpture and selling it for $10,000, and the gallery takes a 50% cut, then you're still going home with $5,000. But if you're selling a pot for $100, then your take home would only be $50. So I've had to be really judicious and thoughtful about how and with what gallery I want to show my work. And it's not to say that it's not an important source of income. It is, but it's also it's just important to be realistic and to take those things into consideration. And something that I really like about Schaller is they take these really nice photographs, and I feel really honored to have my work in their sort of collection. There's some really beautiful pots on their website and their gallery, really amazing artists. So that's a big part of it for me. I mean, it is in a way kind of like marketing too. So you can think about it in those terms. Let's see. So this is at my dad Guillermo's house. He has a showroom, which is basically just like a little section of his, house that he's turned into a little mini gallery. And this is something that people do out here in Minnesota. It's actually, we were talking about Warren McKenzie earlier, who is a really influential potter in the region and a friend of my dad's and sort of his mentor. He started this, and he actually had it based on like an honor code. So people would just drop in, leave cash, take pots, and he wouldn't even have to go and talk to them. He did that for many, many years until his work was in really high demand, and then people would come and buy up all his work and sell it on eBay, which is a bummer. But my dad has sort of adopted a similar model. He has this showroom, and people can drop in. Usually they'll like Venmo. Sometimes, my folks will pop in and say hi. I help manage the space and clean the space, and he charges me like a 20% commission for it. So I'm still paying a commission, but it's significantly less than it would be in a gallery, and it's also, I don't have to ship things anywhere. I can just pop them in the showroom and they're there and available for sale. But let's see. The biggest way for me that I sell my work is through pottery sales, which we were talking earlier a little bit about the St. Croix Pottery Tour. And I'll just, take a step back. I mean, these are just like events that potters come together. It's very DIY. People set up their work together. They run like a checkout system, send out, postcards inviting people to come. And, it's just kind of, instead of taking your pots to a gallery to sell, you get people to come to your place to buy the work. And this was in Venezuela. My dad would host pottery sales. This one I think is from 1993. So I was like 5 years old at the time. So I didn't make any of the pots in this picture, but these are some old friends of my family. And basically I've been growing up around these big pottery sale type events for my whole life. So those feel really like comfortable and natural for me. And I kind of have it figured out, the systems that we use to make the pottery sales happen. And he would host these sales in Venezuela until 2005 when my parents moved away. This is just another picture of Venezuela. Another artist friend made invitations, and this is me modeling a super cool pottery t-shirt. This is before, Google Maps or whatever. They would make invitations with a map to get out to the house, which was kind of difficult to find out in the country. And I've really embraced and really appreciate, some of the DIY approach to making these events happen. It's kind of a part-time job, setting up the pottery sales and the events and coordinating some of our help and hiring people to, manage certain aspects of it. We have a really steep driveway, so we got to hire golf cart people to ferry people up and down. And I really enjoy making the cards. So this is just a collage that I made for our holiday sale, which we have every year. Oh, and while I'm talking about marketing, I feel like the biggest way that I have seen results in terms of marketing is doing these mailings and also doing like an email newsletter. And I really try to limit how much time I spend marketing on social media. I don't really think it generates a lot of results for me. I know that a lot of people have success with it, but it just ends up taking up so much of my time. I just have found that it's been sort of like diminishing returns. Even if you get engagement on social media, it doesn't necessarily translate to like people showing up at your event or actual sales. So that was my experience with social media. Plus I have no self-control, so I had to take it off my phone. And here's the poster for the St. Croix Pottery Tour. Again, it's coming up May 9th, 10th, and 11th. And like we said, there's, several different host potters. The hosts all invite, a group of guests. We'll have 10 potters at our studio this year. Let's see. So this is I'll just show you some pictures from the event at our studio, at Guillermo's place. It's the only stop on the tour, the only studio that doesn't have separate booths for all of our artists. We like to have the pots mixed together on the tables so that it's sort of a shared display. You can see there's a little card in the front there that identifies all the different artists because we ask people to use different color price tags. So if people want to know who made what, they can refer to one of those little guides. But we really like to mix the pots together on the display. Let me see. So we feel like the aim is to show the pots in a way they might be set up in someone's home and encourage visitors to look at the pots from all of the potters and consider them without necessarily knowing who made them right away. This is Potter Steve Rolfe. It's also a really fun experience to set it up together because we get to, it's kind of like making a collaborative installation. I mean, set up the tables and decide what pot goes where and with whose work. It's really nice. I feel like mixing the pots together, it was sort of the default for me growing up because Guillermo has always done that at pottery sales. And then when I became a potter, I realized it takes a certain amount of trust for a potter to want to put, their work out mixed in with a bunch of other people's work. And so it can be kind of jarring, I think, if you've never seen it before. But we also get so much positive feedback about it. People really love it. And we're really fortunate. We have a lot of good turnout and good sales for that weekend. So I think we're doing something right with it. Yeah. I've also been, a friend of mine told me that she really likes not having to go into a booth in order to look at the work. You can kind of take your time and wander, and you don't have to talk to somebody if you don't feel like talking to somebody, and you don't have to feel obligated to like pick something up or anything. You can just sort of let it wash over you and experience the work, and also notice relationships between pots by different potters, which you might not be able to do otherwise. And then we also have little, areas where there's information about each potter and an example of their work. And this is Shika Joshi. She's based out of Austin, Texas. And it's just really wonderful opportunity to educate people about the work. And a lot of folks that come are, people who have made pottery at least once or twice before. So we have a really curious audience, and it's really nice to be able to connect with them face to face that way. Yeah. One thing about being a studio potter, the way that I've been doing it is that I do spend a lot of time by myself, which can be kind of tough. But having these big collaborative events to work toward really helps with that, helps counterbalance that. We're kind of, it's kind of a cute, dorky little family, Okay, so how am I doing on time? Okay, I just have a couple, just one final thought that I'll leave you guys with, and then I'll hand it back to Joe. I really love making pots because I love food, and I think that I really love having objects in my life that are made by hand. I feel like we're surrounded by objects in our daily lives where we don't really know where they come from, and we don't really know who made them. I mean, most things, even if they come in a plastic package or are made by a person, but we're not really connected to the source of that object, feel pretty alienated from it. And so I feel like handmade pottery it's really human, and it connects you to other people. It invites questions about other objects that are in the world around you, other handmade things in the world around you. And it kind of makes me feel connected to, the history of pottery and people who have made pottery throughout history. And I think that, for me, I feel like, and maybe this is cliche or kind of self-evident, but learning how to make pots it's really hard. It's a struggle. It takes time. It takes a lot of failure. You have to and the only way out is through. You have to show up and be willing to make mistakes and be willing to try again in order to learn. But it's that struggle that is what makes it so gratifying when you finally see results, or you have new questions. And I think that in the struggle, that's where the learning happens. And it's something that I don't know. It's just incredibly satisfying and gratifying over time. It's kind of like lifting weights. You lift a heavy weight, and it's really hard. You get through it, and then you grow stronger as you move forward. And that's it for me. I will pass it back over to Joe, and in case you guys have any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Alana. That was really fantastic. Very intuitive. And, I mean, no, seriously, you talked a lot about things that I think about. I'm sure that Rochelle thinks about, especially, I mean, I have numerous questions and follow-ups. But before I do that, I think it would be better if we open it up to the students and let them continue the dialogue a little bit. And if anyone who's on Zoom, would like to ask a question, just raise your hand or you can put it into the chat. I'll be more than happy to facilitate your question. Um, but is there anyone from the class that might have a question at all or have an inquiry? Don't be shy. It's always an icebreaker. Oh, okay, here we go. Um,
Yeah.
this is from the chat. This is from Rutha Howard, who's in one of our classes. She was wondering, can Alana go over how she uses the wax again? And this is a question because I know Rutha is trying to do very similar things to what you do, especially with that last bowl, which is
Yeah.
drawing layers and using washes.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to share a little bit more about your process? And
I mean, sure. I was looking around because I thought maybe I would have an example of something here, but I don't. I'm gonna just go back to screen sharing and I'll pull up that picture
yeah,
again because
yeah,
it'll help me
because that
know.
bowl is really beautiful. There's so many layers in that. I mean, it seems simple, but there's just a tremendous complexity that's built among the layers, and it takes, I think, a lot of experience and knowledge and process to bring those surfaces out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so it's two layers. Um there's a glaze, like a matte gray glaze, which is sort of the under layer, and there's those iron spots that are coming through. The iron spots are from the clay, so like the darker spots that you see. Um and then essentially I use the wax to paint in the negative space. So like the little up and down arrow type shapes and the circles, those are painted out with the wax.
Mm.
And once that dries, there's a cobalt stain. It's cobalt. It has a little bit of iron and manganese in it as well, that I go back with a brush and brush over it. And the areas where the stain looks almost black, like you can see it on the rim, it looks almost black and sort of at the base. That's where the stain was thick and the glaze was thin.
Mm.
And then there's sort of a gradient in the cobalt stain that goes from like almost black to green to blue. And so in the places where the glaze is thick and the stain is thin, it's blue. And there's like green in between. And I mean, a lot of this is just kind of by chance. Like I will just apply the stain. There are thick spots and thin spots, and you get this like range of color. That's part of it. And then as far as like applying the wax and that process, I use something called carbon ink. I can't remember exactly. It's like a Japanese. It's like a solid that you can mix with water, and essentially, it's something that I use to add little guide dots for myself, so that when I'm painting this pattern onto the pot, I know that it's like where I know where to space it out. So I just have like reference points that indicate where to begin a certain element of the pattern when I'm painting it on there. And then this particular pattern is something that I keep coming back to, and it's something that I sort of pulled out of looking at some of those Persian lanterns that I showed a picture of earlier. And it's really just taken me a long time to kind of abstract it a little bit, change up the scale and proportion depending on how I'm using it, what pot I'm using it on. Yeah, I don't know if that's enough information.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, Rutha can be the judge if you have a follow-up. Oh, perfect. Thank you, she says. Yeah, I mean, that bowl especially, I think what's really interesting is, what makes it work is process. And we talk about process a lot, at least in my class, and how your process affects those relationships, and how your process of thick versus thin on both sides of each layer and
Hmm.
kind of the randomness of those relationships creates this kind of natural diversity amongst the like visual color and textural relationship of the surface. And that can sometimes be hard for, I think, people to pick up on is when you develop, these surfaces they are simple and complex at the same time, but it's really a factor of process and how you're engaging with your materials.
Yeah,
Um,
and sometimes it's just about like, I mean, it's kind of about just staying out of the way sometimes, just like knowing
yeah.
how much control you want to put into it, and then also just letting random things happen, because sometimes that's when really beautiful stuff can emerge too.
Yeah, staying out of the way of materials doing what they need to do, right? I speak a lot about keeping your fingerprint away from your pot sometimes,
Mhm.
and how that can perhaps muddle the material and the natural beauty of what the material is doing. Um,
Mhm.
and maybe that there's a little bit of coordination or correlation there between what you're doing and maybe what we're talking about in class.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
How about for the rest of you guys? Don't be shy. This is the opportunity.
No
Oh,
questions?
here we go from Aaron.
Oh,
Um,
that's a really good question.
yeah, here I'll read
Um,
it so everyone can understand if that's okay. Um,
mhm.
does Alana have different price points for her work if sold from a farmer's market versus an art gallery? That is a very good question.
Yeah, I mean the short answer is technically no, but there are certain things that there's like a floor to pricing that I would send to a gallery. Like so for me, I really love having pots that are priced at a really wide range. So I like having something that like someone who's, a student who isn't, doesn't have any expendable income, just like something, if they really want something and is inspiring to them, they can pick it up. So I've been making these little tiny untrimmed plates and treating them almost like test tiles. I'll do some decorative thing on them that I've been thinking about, but it's maybe unfinished, and selling them for like 28 bucks, 26 bucks. So these little teeny tinies. And the lanterns are probably, 350, 360, something like that. So I think what I would end up doing is having pots in my gallery shows that are a little bit more expensive naturally, and not sending them those inexpensive ones because it just isn't really worth it. Um, yeah, I don't want to undercut the gallery if I'm selling work versus they're selling work. So I try to be really careful and not raise my prices at the gallery too much. Yeah, which also makes it tricky because you have to cut the profit with them. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
It's like sometimes for example, like Schaller Gallery, which
Mhm.
is like has a huge audience. Um, would you look at that as maybe sometimes being like an opportunity for marketing where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I'm going to throw these pots up there and, I might eat a lot of the profit on the pots, but it will offer some extra exposure. Does that come into play? How do you handle that? And should I
Absolutely.
not do
I
this
mean,
video?
yeah, absolutely. That's like a big factor for me. I mean, I really feel very lucky to have, Schaller, wanting to show my work, because they really take the time to photograph things, and I am not a photographer at all, so it's really nice to, and they've been really generous. I've used some of their photographs, like they'll just give me the high resolution ones in like for like press stuff or for website stuff like that. So there, I can't say that all galleries will do that kind of stuff, but for me it's been really nice with Schaller. Yeah, I don't want to set that expectation if that's not a common practice for most galleries, um but I do think of it as being like a marketing thing for sure.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That kind of makes it more worthwhile financially. Yeah.
How about from the classroom? Anything from classroom? Um,
No.
um,
Da-da-da.
was that you, Rochelle? Did you have
Yeah.
something?
Hey, thanks, Alana. That was really
Hey,
great. Sorry, I haven't chimed in. I'm behind the computer. I'm not in front of the camera. Can she even hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh,
I
okay.
can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I wasn't sure. I have a question, I guess. You guys, no one has a question? You guys all have a lot of other questions. No, not right now. Okay. How much time? Well, I know there's not like an equation, but studio making time compared to going out into the world selling, marketing, how do you divvy up your time?
Oh my God. I don't know. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel like it's definitely a bit seasonal. We live in the upper Midwest where in the winter, everything like from January to May is pretty quiet. It's cold, so there's not often a lot of events or marketing or sales type stuff that are happening during that time. So I kind of hunker down and work in the studio a lot in the winter. And then in the summer, we have the pottery tour, which is takes up a significant amount of time getting ready and preparing work for that. I like to have lots of pots for that event. Um, and then in the summer there's markets, so that's usually it takes me a full day to do a market between
Mhm.
setup and taking it down and stuff like that. So I don't have a clear sense. All told, um I try to take about 2 days off a week if I can. I really try to either have a weekend or work a couple of half days if I have other commitments. It's taken me a really long time to learn that other parts of your life really will suffer if you don't take breaks and take time off, which is a hard thing to do. Even though I don't know, I'm like a recovering couch potato, so it feels very weird to be working too much. But as far as the breakdown between studio time and work time, I think it's probably 30% time doing like administrative stuff and 70% time in the studio, like 30% doing other stuff and 70% time in the studio, if not like 40/60. It's part-time work doing all the
Yeah.
other supportive work. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it can be fun. I like making those cards.
They look great.
Thanks.
I hope your sale goes really well.
Thanks. I hope so too. I think it'll
It
be good.
will.
Yeah.
Could I follow up on something like that, which is, I a lot of students, I think, can sometimes be conflicted in what they're really interested in, what they study. A lot of our students are still young and haven't gotten into like their professional field, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. I remember when I was in school, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I always knew that I had a direction. And you had mentioned before that, you started off in one career and then moved into this career.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably working a lot harder maintaining this career. But I was wondering, what's the balance? I mean, is it worth it? Like, do you find that doing, and I'm insinuating that you do what you love.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm getting at is trying to ask the question of, how is your life has it become more fulfilled since you've made this switch into something perhaps that you're more interested in and you're more willing to wake up every day and deal with some of the things? Or, you know,
Yeah.
like do you feel like you've made the right choice, and is it better because it's more fulfilling? It's something that you want to do and something you're interested in.
Yeah, and I personally feel like I was always just a terrible employee. Like I just like really struggled when I didn't feel internally motivated. Salary or a paycheck was just really tough for me to care. I mean, you have dysfunctional work environments sometimes, and that can have an impact. And I think for me, it really works. Like if it's coming from me, if it's my like creative impulses and my need to, my obligations, I feel strongly obligated to the guest potters of the pottery tour to like make sure the event is really well run and organized. When it's something that I personally really care about, I feel like I love it, and I couldn't see myself really doing anything else. As long as I'm able to make a living doing it, I see myself doing it. But that's not to say that that is true for everybody. Like I have a really good friend who's an amazing potter who would rather work, a few nights at the pizza shop, a few nights or a few days doing like construction, and then he's like really free in what he makes in his studio because he doesn't rely on selling his work as much for income. So he just goes nuts. He can be really wild, and like that's really important to him, and that works for him, that balance of and like way of earning money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really interesting point too, because it doesn't have to be one or the other, right?
exactly.
It could be a combination. And for me, when I was younger, the only thing that I knew was just keep working. Have a studio and just keep working. And that worked out. And then I fell into other things um but yeah, I was always able to have that freedom of making the pots I wanted.
Mhm.
Um and and I guess that kind of goes into something else that you were talking about, which is that balance between creativity and financial pressure that you might go through. Is there anything like specific you could point to that might drive that? Like how do you maintain, your interest in your work when hey, I gotta probably make like 20 of these bowls because that's really going to sell. And is that like kind of a really hard thing to get through? Like how do you balance that stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it can be. I joke, this is terrible, but I joke with my spouse that being a potter is the least bad job I've ever had, because like there are moments where you don't want to go to work, but you have to go to work. It's like that with anything. And fortunately, with pottery, like even if you're making a form that maybe you feel like you've already got it figured out or it's not super inspiring, like generally speaking, there's always something that you can get from the repetition and the practice. I mean, it's like doing drills or something like that. And also having commissions or having those kinds of standard forms that you like to make or that you make for various events. I mean, thinking of it as inventory sounds a little like, retail or whatever, but thinking of stocking up on those pots, it to me, if I'm feeling stuck creatively, also, that's a really good way to get the juices flowing because it's low pressure. You kind of know what you're doing, even though you can still learn from it. So it's hard to motivate yourself sometimes. Like it's never going to be just like joyful every single day, but there's also advantages to having that kind of like carry water, chop wood, like the
Mhm.
mundane parts of it as well. And I should also say, I mean, you know, it's not it's not a it's not a great income being a potter. Like it, even if you have success, I mean, it doesn't mean that things will always be stable or easy. I mean, I do anticipate at some point, like I probably will have to, I don't know, I'll have lean years and I'll have to wait tables or figure something out, or teach maybe, or I don't know, who knows how I'll figure it out at the time. It's not a steady income. It's not a salary. I generally don't make almost any money the first quarter of every year because it's so quiet here. So I have to like work really hard around the holidays to sell work. And I feel like if I can like take a step back, I think it's something that largely in like, America and our country, like it's unfortunate because we don't have a lot of like social safety net. We don't have debt-free college. We don't have programs like universal healthcare that would make it more affordable for people to like take the risk of being a potter and like be able to go into some being an independent artist and try to make a living doing that, because the financial pressures are real. And I'll say too is like, and I'm not here to shill for, having a partner or getting married or whatever, but like if you're a single person too, the financial pressures of like making your way can be really difficult. My spouse is also has his own small business, and so we're able to like really support each other in our work, sometimes financially and sometimes practically. Like we do a lot of work together. And this was something that really bothered me when I was younger, and I saw my dad being a potter, and a lot of his friends were potters, and a lot of them were guys, and then their wives would like raise kids and do everything else. So they would spend all their time in the studio, and the women would like, I mean, this is sort of, I'm sort of making it an extreme case, right? But the reality is that like being a potter it's kind of a lifestyle. The way that it has been done, or the way that I'm doing it, like, and it requires, if you're going to have a partner or a relationship or whatever, I mean, there has to be like buy-in for it, because it can be really difficult. Yeah, not to
Yeah,
discourage from pursuing it if they're interested, but it is a reality too.
I think that's I think that's prevalent in any small business, really. I mean, and the creative disciplines, in my opinion, in my experience, are entrepreneurial at heart. Um, being in the creative disciplines normally means that you're creating your own business and you're using your skills. Unless there's some sort of firm. Some of our programs, the students in the class, they might be graphic and media design majors or something like that, where there's a larger infrastructure of organization and, business community to enter into as like an employee. But my brother he's a designer and screen printer, and he owns his own business, and it's a family affair, like.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, they deal with the same pressures, and they're trying to forecast and build revenue, and it's interesting to see. And my sister also is a professional dancer and choreographer, so I'm lucky, I see them doing their small business things on either side. So it's really interesting to see how the creative disciplines are natural, entrepreneurial, and small business, and to see that the challenges are kind of across the gamut, and
Yeah.
maybe discussions like these are really helpful, especially for our next generation who, needs to be prepared with these types of um, lessons. Because I know when I was going to college, we never spoke about the business side
Yeah.
of the creative disciplines. And that is something that I feel is tremendously important to expand upon, at least now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, it's not about me. I know we're
Sasha,
getting late. I had I had just maybe one more thing that I thought.
Sasha also has a question too.
Oh, Sasha, yes.
Yeah, in class. We're here.
Woo! Go,
Um,
Sasha.
am I about to ask like what's the most you've made from like what's the most profit you've made from the market and like what's the least amount? Because I don't know. I saw this video once of like this person selling their art at markets and they have to pay to be at the market, right?
Mhm.
And then like sometimes they would earn a lot and sometimes like it wouldn't be worth, going to the market because they just paid to be there and then they didn't even get like any money in return. I mean,
Yeah. Can I,
Okay.
so, oh, do you want to recap that question, Rochelle?
No, you're good. Go for it.
Okay. Well, what I heard was a question about markets and whether or not, it's worth it if you don't make any money going to the market. I mean, that's definitely a reality. And that definitely can happen. People sometimes, especially, I think, before the internet, I think a lot of times artists would do more craft fairs. That was like a really common thing. And I think there's still a lot of craft fairs now, but sometimes those cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars to participate. And sometimes people have to invest in things like, I don't know, a tent and furniture to store your stuff, and it can be a lot of work, and it can be really tough, and you can take a hit and take a loss when you're doing those. There's no guarantee. Personally, I've only had a few experiences like that. There was a market last summer that it just poured rain and nobody came, and it was like I think it was $200 or something to participate. So it was a loss for me that day. I find that I had been going to this one farmer's market in Minneapolis, and my sales every summer have gone up going there because I've started developing relationships with the people there. It's been a really good opportunity to talk to people, to connect with people, and then people know that you're going to be there, so they will come and anticipate you. They've signed up for my mailing list, so they got my email that says, oh, I'm going to be at the market this weekend, and they can plan to be there. I think unless you're working with someone who's coordinating an event, who really knows the audience and knows that your work is a really good fit for that audience, it's always going to be a little bit of a gamble. And sometimes having a farmer's market or an event that you can do routinely so that you can build up your following there, that I think has been the thing that's worked for me. Another thing about farmers markets too is that the booth fees are usually really low. And it's not an arts environment, but my work really works in that setting. It has, I think of myself as much as a craft person as an artist, and it's food related. It's connected to that. And the aesthetics, I think, kind of work in that environment. So a farmer's market might have a much lower booth fee. Yeah, it's frustrating for sure. It can be. Did that answer the question? It was a little quiet. I think I heard it, but was there any other part of that question?
No.
Okay.
I got my own question. We come over here because I was testing the mic out earlier. It's sort of personal question, not in like money related though, which is three-part question. Number one, what is the oldest ceramics piece you've ever seen that you've used to help design your work? I'm a really time-based guy.
Okay.
Number two is if you could look back at your first ever creation that you did and see the design style you used, the patterns you did use, and look at your stuff now, would you do anything different, or would you like tell yourself anything different? And number three, if you could find like one ceramics based item from whatever time period you wanted, and it was a perfect condition, what would you want to find? Like what time period?
That was a big question.
Cool. These are good questions. Well, I think that, well, thank you. Thanks for that. I think the oldest work, boy, I mean, I'm not a historian. I'm not an art historian. I think those Iranian lanterns, those Persian lanterns, and the Mimbres pots too. I think those are some of the oldest pieces that I've really spent time looking at. I don't have my dates of ancient pottery really sorted in my head, but there's a wonderful book called Seeing with New Eyes, The Art of Ancient Americas. There's some really beautiful ceramics and like stone carvings from the Americas. Like I couldn't tell you how old they are, really old. But I think those lanterns are probably my favorite of those ancient pots at the moment. Your second question was about how, if I could go back and look at some of my early work or my earliest pieces, what would I change?
You would change.
What would I change, or would I change?
What would you change, or if you would change anything?
I really don't think that I would. I think that the early work that you're making is really important and really special because it's your first step. But the pieces, it's more about the process. The pieces, the resulting pots, you can get information from them and you can learn by looking at them. But it's really just about moving through that process and continuing and keep going, and make more pots. That's always been the approach that my dad has instilled in me, and that Warren McKenzie is sort of his approach too, is to just keep, I mean, Joe was talking about that too, just make more pots. And I think there comes a point in your career, you should just enjoy the process and not think so much about the resulting work. You should just learn, just get in there and try, especially when you're making pots on the wheel, because you can make things quickly and there's a learning curve.
I mean, I'm not allowed to use the wheel, but
It's glitching.
Oh, I didn't hear that last.
I'm not allowed to use the wheel, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe someday they'll let you use the wheel. And I'm sorry, what was the last thought? Or the last
was if you could find a perfect piece of ceramics from any time period in any place, location in the world, and you could see it, observe it, and use it to further your own art, what would you choose?
Well, I think I would love to see, I didn't show any pictures, but I've started making some like more figurative pots and like pots with faces on them, which there's a really strong tradition of, using vessels as a representation of figures and people and, faces specifically from all different cultures throughout history. And there's some really beautiful, I showed a picture of one earlier, but there's all kinds of varieties of face jugs from like medieval Europe. And I think I would love to really look at one of those and really investigate those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lana. And we have one more question from in the class right here, right now.
Awesome.
Yeah, just speak loud enough so that she can hear you. Maybe like come a little closer to the camera.
Yeah, I just do that because I mic tested her.
I've kind of two questions.
Shout it.
What's like your favorite thing that you've ever made? And then you talked a lot about like how you're inspired by nature. So like from that, have you ever like pressed pieces of nature into it, or do you more like use like the wax and other methods to kind of emulate designs from nature?
Good questions. Okay. My favorite thing that I've ever made is tough. But lately, in the last couple of years, I've done this twice. I've been invited to be part of a wood firing, which is, you can use different fuel to heat up a kiln. You could use electricity, you could use gas. And in this case, this pottery uses wood. And there's a long tradition of wood firing, but I'm really new to it. And I had some really wonderful results with some of those scallop texture pots that I've made with the wood firing, because there's a lot of like debris and ash and things that are flying around in the kiln and they can stick to the surface of the pot. We were talking a little bit about staying out of the way of the material and like letting the kiln do its thing and chance, happening or being a factor. So I was really excited by seeing those results and how the kiln interacted with some of those textures that I've been doing. And then, so I would say that that's one of the favorite things that I've been making recently. And then the other question about using, like, I've seen people do like they take a leaf or they take some sort of natural object and then use it to press in. And I've actually never done that. I have found for me that like I really like drawing. I really like translating that. I think I showed some pictures of some plates that had drawings of oak leaves on them. For some reason, I think there's a stronger relationship between the lines of the form of the pot and the lines of my drawing, because I'm the person who's doing them. And I think that if I had taken a leaf from my front yard, I made those after an oak tree fell in our front yard and we were cleaning up oak leaves for a while afterward. But if I had taken one of those leaves and put it on the pot, the scale might be weird, or just the line quality would be a little bit different. But I could see using that as a starting point and really working from that as a possibility, because I've seen people use those before and it can be really beautiful. So I've never tried it. Thank you though.
Joe, how are we doing on time? Alana?
We're getting pretty late, but
Yep.
you know,
I'm-
Okay.
if you're okay, Alana,
Yep.
are there any other questions, or
I
are
have a
you?
follow-up question to that one, if that's okay.
He has a one-part question.
It's a one-part question.
Okay.
Wow.
One-part
Which
quick
is,
question.
If you could do a nature-based, like, if you ever decide to do a nature-based item, would you use the coffee beans that you grew up with to use it?
Alana's gone.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep. Joe was the main screen.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Do you want to repeat the question?
I think she got it.
I didn't hear the question.
So it was sort of a follow-up question to what they said, which was if you would you ever use a nature-based item with like coffee beans you grew up around?
Would I ever use those to do like an
to make a
inlay?
nature-based item.
I don't know. I feel like maybe I again, I think that I would be more interested in trying to interpret it like through drawing or carving than like taking the actual object and pressing it into the clay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, what's beautiful about those coffee pots, well, I don't even want to call them that, is that it's the result of like experimentation and mark making.
Mhm.
And sometimes the mark can be abstract and then we can apply this value to it. And sometimes if you're using the real thing, then perhaps you don't get that really expressive quality, especially its relationship to the size and shape of the pot, like you were talking about. Sometimes the line that you make, or the description that you make for the subject matter fits better with the shape of the pot than the actual real thing.
Yeah, and I like that it leaves it more open to interpretation too, because you might see something different if it's not a literal depiction of something.
Yeah, that mild sense of ambiguity and abstraction just kind of opens it up and becomes, is it a texture or is it subject matter? Especially with how it's like repeated across the vessel shape. Yeah, again, that's one of my more attractive pots. Those pots and that last bowl, those are the pots that I really, really like in your work. I mean, I like a lot of your work, but I'm really attracted to those. Those are the ones that I would buy. So I'm gonna have to come out to Minnesota this.
Yeah,
couple
yes. If any of you, these guys have my email. If any of you want to come out to Minnesota, you want to see pots and you're interested, shoot me an email. You can get my email from Rochelle or from Joe. I would be more than happy to see you guys and show you around, and yeah, maybe visit some studios.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I had a couple more things, but we'll just we could probably talk all day. I really liked though how you talked about the functionality of pots, and especially when you said dinged up pots. I can relate. I have a lot of pots that I love to use from other potters, and they might, I might chip them, and I'm like, oh crap, that bowl was $80, but it still works, and I still love it. And
Yeah.
and I like how you were talking about, that functionality and that relationship and the human side of pots and that like human factor that comes out of using pottery. Maybe, I don't know, maybe just for a last comment, is there anything you'd want to add about that?
Gosh. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like there's a certain amount of like aesthetic flattening that sometimes you can get in. I mean, you can see it in like the built world. You can see it in just some objects that we have in our daily life. And it's not to say that there isn't a time and a place for industrial objects and processes and all of that, but I don't want to be nostalgic necessarily, but I think that there's a certain level of richness, of diversity of like shapes and ideas and forms, even if you're working within a tradition, a functional tradition, that used to be really a lot more commonplace when people, had handmade pots generally in their life, or handmade objects more in their life. I mean, even my spouse likes to work on cars, historically has worked on cars, and cars are now like, you kind of can't work on them. Like a new car, there's no space for someone to get in there and work on it. So I feel like people have a more distant, more alienated relationship from the objects around them. And I think pots, I love pots because it's a way of connecting with another person through an object. And I also I love to eat and I love to cook. And it brings all of that stuff together for me. And I think there's something about the handmade nature of those objects that can really, I don't know, it can be really enriching, and it can really make you feel more connected to other people in the world.
Yeah. Can't agree more. I can't agree more. I really relate to that. So,
Cool.
And if you come to my house and you see my dishes, you'll see that.
I'd love to see that. Yeah, cool.
There's not a single dish that's from the same potter. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have a couple of the same, but yeah, when I have people over, there's like 10 different bowls that they have to eat from, and I love that because it's this connection to another human, and you get to almost feel their hand through the pot, because especially if it's a wheel thrown pot, you can feel that wobble, and you can understand how it felt in their hand when they were making it, and how it feels, and how they wanted you to handle that pot, because a lot of times the shape that they're creating, compels you or the user how to hold it and how to use it. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of like personal relationship there that can go on forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times, like, the shape will inform, just like a coffee cup that is open like this will get cold faster, and a coffee cup that's more contained, or has a sloping shape, it'll keep the coffee hot faster. There's like all these different considerations, and you can feel someone's decisions and thought process, or you can understand it when you start thinking about handmade pots. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I guess I think that's a pretty good place to end. What do you think? Do you have anything else, or you?
No, not really. I just hope that, the challenges are real of pursuing something like this as a living. I think I would be remiss if I didn't point out that I've had like pretty tremendous advantages just by having my dad already be connected to this field. I don't know if I would be a potter if I hadn't had that experience as a kid. And, I think that it's if you're interested in pursuing it, it's really about making those connections with people and finding creative ways to collaborate with other artists, and just learning through other people, and I hope people feel inspired to give it a go and to try and make more pots. We need more potters.
Can't agree more. Hear that, you guys? We need some more potters in there, okay?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place. And I guess first I'd like to thank Rochelle for all of her work in organizing this and bringing you into the scene. And we wouldn't have this amazing conversation without her efforts and her reaching out to you and your relationship. So we really appreciate that. And thanks to all the students and for everyone who joined us. And most of all, thanks for Alana for taking the time and sharing your perspective and your experience and answering our questions. That was really nice, especially for 90 minutes. So that was really appreciate that. So, and good luck at the St. Croix. I will see you someday there, not this year, but I will see you. So I look forward to that.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks again. I had a wonderful time, and thanks Rochelle for inviting me, and Joe for hosting, and everybody for showing up and asking some questions and stuff too. Thank you.
Thanks, Alana.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alana. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you.
Bye.